But if you look back now at the last, I want to say, at least 4 movies that have won the Cinematography Award at the Oscars, they were all filmed digitally with great cinematographers. But it took a while to get there. Technology is enabling us to do things better, to present our movies in a better fashion. Why should we deal with scratches in the film? Just like why should we deal with strobing? Strobing is an artifact of 24 frame per second projection. We have the ability now to get rid of that, but we work in an art form. So we need to learn how to work in high frame rate and give it the same quality and that same feel that films have. And I think we have the ability to do that. I think we just have to learn how to use those tools. And I see down the road that all films will be shot at a high frame rate because I think theaters are going to want to present it at a high frame rate. And I think the presentation side of high frame rate is more important than the creation side, because not every shot needs to be created at high frame rate, but it has the capability of being played back at high frame rate. So if you're dealing with a very visual effects intensive show, there might be shots where you don't want to render every shot at a high frame rate. And you can render it at 24 frames per second, double print those frames, and play it back at a high frame rate. The audience isn't going to know. Close-ups, I would say, don't make a difference in a high frame rate. It's the action shots, it's the moving, it's the wide panoramas where you can really see the difference. I think where our industry makes a mistake is where they think technology is the answer to making a movie good. Technology does not improve a bad story. 3D does not improve a bad movie. High frame rate does not improve a bad movie. I think we have to go back to what makes our narrative storytelling work, which are the characters we put on the screens and the stories that we tell, and not to keep chasing technology answers or think that that's the way to do it. If you look at what movies work for audiences on a global basis, it's stories that they can relate to. It's movies that have themes that are bigger than their genre. Then how do you put those themes up on the screen? That's when you really have success. When you can take a small movie, and when I say small, I'm talking about a 2-character movie like Gravity, and put it up on the big screen in a way that becomes a transportive experience. People want to flock to that. People want to respond to that. I think what people need to realize is that every movie is a startup company. And going down a process of creating that and bringing it to reality is not an easy task to stay on track. Nobody sets out to make a bad movie. But along the way, there are outside factors that come into play where someone might suggest to a movie, it should be funnier. And they try to make it funnier, but it was never a comedy. They might say, try to include more action, but there's never more, and it wasn't an action movie. So I think one of the keys, and I think one of Jim Cameron's great strengths, is at the beginning of a process, he identifies a bullseye that is very far away. And along the way, he never loses sight of what that bullseye is. And I attribute this to Jim being a writer. And I think that Jim really has several different stages of writing. He writes the initial script. He rewrites when we're in production. And when he's in the editing process, he's approaching it like a writer. And he's rewriting the script then, always keeping in mind what that bullseye is down the road. And that's where I think people tend to fail. And I think also people look to, they say they have funding for a movie, let's go make the movie. We have a release date we have to fill, let's go fill a release date. Release dates don't make movies. Movies make release dates. I remember when I was at the studio at 20th Century Fox, someone said, this was several years ago, someone said, let's make this movie so we could come out on the Silence of the Lambs date. Well, before Silence of the Lambs, there was no Silence of the Lambs date. Silence of the Lambs was an extraordinary movie that went out and made it work. If we can present movies that are what I call clutter busters, because there's so much out there, people are going to go to that movie no matter what date you put it on. Business side of things has changed in the industry, mostly in the process and the democratization of technology. Technology now can be put in anybody's hands. And when we were making Titanic, we would have to go out and buy a $750,000 computer to render some of the shots that we wanted to do in the film. That's what we had to add that to our budget to cover those costs. Today, that same work can be done on a desktop machine in somebody's home. So I think that the visual effects industry is having to come to terms with that. And how do these companies create themselves so they could survive that democratization? Because again, it's not the technology, it's the people behind the technology that make the visual effects work. That's why we're so lucky to work with Joe Letteri and his team of people down at Weta. They really have the same tool set that other people have. But how do they communicate? How do they work with us? How do they share our vision to bring it up on the screen? The largesse of some of the visual effects companies over the last 10 years has been a burden that they could not carry during the ebbs and flows of production, when they found themselves suddenly competing not with another 300 or 400 seat visual effects company, but competing with a mom and pop organization that has maybe 10 seats, 8 seats, and they retract to 2 when they need to. That's a very different paradigm for these visual effects companies, and they're just coming to terms with that now. There are 2 things that give me the most personal sense of satisfaction. One is the loyalty of the crew that we have working with us, because we stand on their shoulders. Filmmaking is a collaborative effort, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who contribute to that. And we have people who have been with us for 20 years at Lightstorm Plus. We have a crew of people who have never left with us from the first movie. Richie Bainham, Ryan Champney, Dan Neufeld, people like that who are still with us. That, to me, I take great pride in, that we're able to keep our team together. The other thing that for me is personally the most satisfying process of making a movie is when we screen the movie for an audience. And while the audience is watching the movie, I'm watching the audience, because that's who we make the movie for. And to see how they react and to see them embrace the stories we're putting up there, there's nothing more rewarding than that. When I go to bed at night, I sit around and I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I have a great family, a great wife, and I get to do something I love every day. And to be able to make movies that go out there and touch people, not just that people see, but that truly touch them in their hearts, affect them how they live, there's nothing that can top that. And I think that's something we have to remember as we make movies, that we have a responsibility and an opportunity to reach people today on a global basis and to make a small difference in their lives. Maybe when they leave the theater, they see the world a little bit differently. They think about someone a little bit differently. That there's nothing more satisfying, more gratifying than to have people come up to me and say, I saw this movie and this is how it changed me. This is how it affected me. And that's great. What I have been very impressed about with FMX is that it is an opportunity for people to meet with each other and to actually share ideas and talk about things in the industry. It's not a show that is overwhelming like so many of the shows that are in Las Vegas, where you go to it and it's just a barrage, a cacophony of noise and images. Here, it's about interacting with people. And I think that like the distribution business of films is a global business, I think the visual effects of films, the gaming industry is also a global business, and that there are great companies that are here in Europe that are attending this event that might not have an opportunity to attend some of the events in the state. And I think it's a great opportunity to be exposed to new technologies, new people, and again, to be able to take a breath and interact with them and get to know them a little.